Listen up, because what I'm about to show you isn't just another history list. These are the 10 most terrifying warriors the medieval world ever produced. Men who didn't just fight battles. They ended dynasties, broke empires, and became the stuff of nightmares for entire kingdoms. Some of them were born nobles, others were slaves who clawed their way to immortality. One of them was so feared that mothers used his name to scare children into behaving centuries after he was dead. If you've ever wondered what it really took to be the deadliest human being on a battlefield, where everyone was trying to kill you, stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you'll understand why these warriors were just soldiers. They were living weapons. They were myths forged in blood and steel, and the stories about them are so insane, you'll question whether they were even human. But before we charge into the list, here's something most people get completely wrong about medieval combat. It wasn't about honor or fair fights. It was survival. It was about being the last one standing when the field was littered with corpses. These men mastered that reality better than anyone else in history. They turned killing into an art form and the battlefield into their personal graveyard. Let's begin at number 10. At number 10, we have the Varangian Guard's most legendary member, Harald Hardrada, the man who was so hard to kill that he became king of Norway after surviving everything the medieval world could throw at him. Harald started as a 15-year-old noble fighting for his half-brother, King Olaf of Norway. When Olaf was betrayed and killed at the Battle of Stiklestad in 1030, Harald took 30 axe blows, was left for dead in the mud, and somehow crawled away alive. Most men would have called that a career. Harald saw it as Tuesday. He fled to the Byzantine Empire with 500 warriors and joined the Varangian Guard, the emperor's personal bodyguard, made up of the toughest northern mercenaries money could buy. For the next decade, Harald fought in Sicily, North Africa, the Middle East, and even Jerusalem. Byzantine chroniclers say he never lost a battle. He captured 80 Arab strongholds. He blinded enemy kings as punishment. He once took a city by pretending to be dead, having his men carry his corpse into the church for burial, then jumping out of the coffin swinging an axe when the gates opened. When he finally returned to Norway loaded with Byzantine gold, he didn't just take the throne, he crushed every rival so completely that no one dared challenge him for 15 years. And at age 50, still hungry for more, he launched the last great Viking invasion of England in 1066. He died at Stamford Bridge with an arrow in the throat, laughing, surrounded by dead Englishmen. Still the hardest man alive right to the end. Harald Hardrada didn't just fight for glory. He fought because the world hadn't invented anything yet that could stop him. At number 9, we have William Marshal, the greatest knight who ever lived. The man actually called the best knight in the world by his contemporaries. And when you hear what he did, you'll understand why. William started as a landless nobody, a younger son with nothing but a sword and a horse. In his 20s, he entered tournaments, the medieval equivalent of cage fighting with lances, and dominated so completely that he captured 500 knights for ransom over his career. 500, that's not a typo. He was making 6 figures in today's money every summer just by knocking rich nobles off horses and holding them hostage until their families paid up. But tournaments were just warm-ups. When the real wars came, William was unstoppable. He fought in every major campaign in France and England for 50 years. At age 70, he led a charge against a French invasion force at the Battle of Lincoln in 1217, personally unhorsing the French commander while wearing full-plate armor heavier than most men could even lift at that age. He served 5 English kings, was regent of England, and when King John's barons rebelled, William crushed them so decisively that the Magna Carta itself might not exist without his boot on everyone's neck. Chroniclers say he never lost a tournament or a battle in his life. And when he finally died at 81, the Archbishop of Canterbury said burying him was like burying chivalry itself. William Marshal wasn't born great. He became great by being better at violence than any man alive for 6 straight decades. At number 8, we have El Cid, Rodrigo de Diaz de Vivar, the Spanish warrior so terrifying that even after he died, his enemies ran from his corpse. El Cid started as a Castilian noble fighting for King Sancho feud. When Sancho was assassinated, his brother Alfonso took the throne and exiled El Cid for being too loyal to the dead king. So El Cid did what any reasonable medieval psychopath would do. He became a mercenary and started conquering cities for himself. He took Valencia from the Moors in 1094 after a 9-month siege, ruling it as an independent prince while technically still exiled. The Almoravid Muslims threw everything at him, 40,000 men in massive armies, and El Cid crushed them every time. His most famous battle was the Battle of Court, where he had 3,000 men against 25,001 so decisively that the survivors refused to ever fight him again. But the legend reached its peak after his death. In 1099, Valencia was besieged again. El Cid had been dead for months. His wife Jimena dressed his corpse in full armor, strapped it to his horse Babieca, and sent it out at the head of a night attack. The Moorish army saw the dead El Cid charging them and broke in terror, abandoning the siege. His corpse literally won a battle. El Cid became Spain's national hero because even death couldn't stop him from terrifying his enemies. At number 7, we have the Mamluk warrior Baybars, the slave who destroyed the Crusader states and made the Mongols turn back for the first time in history. Baybars started life as a Kipchak Turk captured and sold as a slave. He was considered defective merchandise because he had a cataract in one eye, so he was sold cheap. That defective slave would go on to become the most feared man in the Middle East. He rose through the Mamluk ranks by being better at killing than anyone else. In 1260, the Mongols under Hulagu Khan were steamrolling the Islamic world, having just sacked Baghdad. They sent a message to the Sultan of Egypt: submit or die. The Sultan panicked and sent Baybars to deal with it. At the Battle of Ain Jalip, Baybars lured the Mongol army into a trap in the hills and annihilated them. It was the first major defeat the Mongols had ever suffered in open battle. The myth of Mongol invincibility died that day in the desert. Then Baybars turned west and systematically destroyed the Crusader kingdoms. He took Antioch in 1268 in an 18-day slaughter so brutal that even Muslim chroniclers called it excessive. He captured the greatest fortresses in history. Crack des Chevaliers, the unconquerable Hospitaller stronghold, fell to him through sheer psychological terror. He sent the garrison's ears to Damascus as a message. By the time Baybars died, possibly poisoned by his own hand after accidentally drinking from the wrong cup, he had ended the Crusader presence in the Holy Land forever and turned Egypt into a superpower, all starting as a half-blind slave nobody wanted. At number 6, we have Richard the Lionheart, the English king who terrified Saladin himself. Richard spent only 6 months of his 10-year reign in England because he was too busy personally leading charges in the Third Crusade. Saladin's chroniclers called him the most remarkable man of his age, and admitted that Muslim soldiers were genuinely afraid to face him in battle. At the Siege of Acre, Richard arrived sick with scurvy, barely able to walk, had himself carried to the front lines on a stretcher, and started picking off Muslim defenders with a crossbow while lying down. At the Battle of Arsuf, he led the largest cavalry charge of the crusade personally, breaking Saladin's army so completely that the road to Jerusalem was open. Richard just chose not to take it for political reasons. His most insane moment came at Jaffa in 1192. Saladin launched a surprise attack with 7,000 men, while Richard had only 2,000. Richard formed his men into a thin line on the beach, personally held the center with a two-handed axe, and fought in the front rank for hours. Saladin's own bodyguard watched from a hill and refused to charge because they were terrified of Richard's personal banner. Richard took 17 wounds that day, including an arrow to the leg, and kept fighting until Saladin's army broke and fled. Muslim sources say Saladin himself watched in stunned silence as one man held an army at bay through sheer ferocity. Richard the Lionheart wasn't just a great commander. He was the medieval equivalent of a walking weapon of mass destruction. At number 5, we have Miyamoto Musashi, the undefeated samurai who killed 60 men in formal duels and never lost once. Musashi fought his first duel at 13 and killed his opponent, a grown samurai, with a wooden staff. By age 29, he had fought 60 duels, all to the death, and won every single one. He showed up late on purpose to psych out opponents, fought with broken oars, fought dual wielding when everyone else used one sword, once killed a man with a thrown hand, fan just to prove a point. His most famous duel was against Sasaki Kojiro, the greatest swordsman of his generation, on Ganri Island in 1612. Musashi arrived hours late, rowing over in a boat he carved an oversized oar from to use as a weapon, when Kojiro drew his famous longsword, drying pole. Musashi charged and crushed his skull with the oar in a single blow. Then walked away, without a scratch. Musashi didn't just win fights, he rewrote the rules of combat. He founded a school of swordsmanship that emphasized adaptability over tradition, wrote the Book of Five Rings, which is still studied by businessmen and generals today, and died undefeated at age 61, sitting upright in full armor after writing his final philosophical work. Miyamoto Musashi didn't fight to live, he lived to fight, and no one ever beat him. At number 4, we have Skanderbeg, the Albanian dragon who held off the entire Ottoman Empire for 25 years with a handful of mountains and pure terror. George Castrioti was taken hostage by the Ottomans as a child and raised as a janissary. He was so good they called him Iskander Bey, Lord Alexander, after Alexander the Great. Then in 1443, he betrayed the Ottomans mid-battle, seized the fortress of Cluj, raised the double-headed eagle flag, and declared war on the largest empire in the world. For the next quarter century, Skanderbeg, with never more than 15,000 men, fought off Ottoman armies that outnumbered him 10-1. He beat Sultan Muradov twice and Sultan Mehmet Huai, the conqueror of Constantinople, 3 times. He used guerrilla tactics in the Albanian mountains that made pursuit impossible, ambushed Ottoman columns in narrow passes, and once routed an army of 40,000 with 8,000 men in a single afternoon. The Ottomans called him the Dragon of Albania. They sent assassins, they offered huge rewards, they invaded with hundreds of thousands of troops. Nothing worked. When Skanderbeg died of malaria in 1468, the Ottomans celebrated for weeks because only death could stop him. Albania fell within 10 years. Skanderbeg became the ultimate symbol of resistance. Even today, his helmet with the goat horns is the national symbol of Albania. Because one man held the Ottoman Empire at bay for an entire generation through skill, cunning, and sheer refusal to lose. At number 3, we have Vlad the Impaler, Dracula, the man who made an entire Ottoman army turn back because they couldn't handle what they saw. Vlad ruled Wallachia in the mid-15th century, wedged between the Ottoman Empire and Hungary. When Sultan Mehmed demanded tribute and janissary recruits, Vlad responded by nailing the turbans of the Ottoman envoys to their heads when they refused to remove them in his presence. In 1462, Mehmed invaded with 90,000 men, the largest army he ever personally led. Vlad had maybe 30,000, so he used scorched earth, poisoned wells, and guerrilla warfare. Then he created the Forest of the Impaled. 20,000 captured Ottoman soldiers and civilians impaled on stakes outside Targovist. When Mehmed's army reached it, the chroniclers say the Sultan's hardened veterans vomited and fled. The army retreated without giving battle. Vlad didn't just impale people, he was a psychological warfare genius. He once invited all the boyars he suspected of treason to Easter dinner, then had them arrested and impaled in order of age while their families watched. He burned entire villages suspected of disloyalty. He dressed as a Turk and infiltrated Ottoman camps to gather intelligence personally. Vlad lost his throne twice and regained it through sheer ferocity. When he was finally betrayed and killed, his head was sent to Constantinople and displayed on a stake. Because even the Ottomans wanted proof he was really dead. Vlad the Impaler didn't fight wars. He weaponized terror so completely that his enemies defeated themselves. At number 2, we have Saladin, the Kurdish warrior who united the Middle East and took Jerusalem back from the Crusaders while earning the respect of his enemies. Saladin started as a vizier's nephew with no land or title. By age 35, he had overthrown the Fatimid Caliphate in Egypt through a combination of military genius and political maneuvering that would make Machiavelli blush. Then he turned east and crushed the Zengid dynasty that employed him. By 1187, he was the most powerful Muslim ruler since the early caliphs. His masterpiece was the Battle of Hattin in 1187. He lured the Crusader army into waterless hills in July, set the grass on fire to create smoke screens, and destroyed the largest Crusader field army ever assembled. King Guy of Jerusalem, the master of the Templars, and most of the nobility were captured. Saladin personally handed King Guy a cup of iced water, then executed Reynold of Châtillon with his own hands for breaking truces. When he took Jerusalem, unlike the Crusaders who had massacred the population in 1099, Saladin allowed safe passage and ransomed the poor for free. Richard the Lionheart called him the greatest and most splendid of all Muslim rulers. Even Crusader chroniclers admitted he was honorable. Saladin united Egypt, Syria, Yemen, and Mesopotamia into a single state that lasted centuries after his death. He died nearly bankrupt because he gave away everything to charity. When his successor opened the treasury, there was 1 gold coin and 40 silver dirhams, because Saladin spent his entire fortune preparing for jihad and helping the poor. Saladin wasn't just feared, he was revered by his enemies as much as his followers. And finally, at number 1, the most feared warrior of the entire medieval world, Genghis Khan, the man who conquered more territory than anyone in history and made half the world terrified to even speak his name. Temujin was born with a blood clot in his fist during a time when his tribe abandoned him, his mother, and his siblings to starve on the steppe after his father was poisoned. He was enslaved, hunted, and betrayed. By age 20, he had reunited the Mongol tribes through a combination of diplomacy, marriage alliances, and absolutely ruthless warfare. He broke the old tribal system by promoting men based on merit instead of birth. He created the largest contiguous land empire in history, 12 million square miles, stretching from the Pacific to the Caspian Sea. He defeated the Jin dynasty of China with its million-man armies using cavalry tactics no one had seen before. He destroyed the Khwarezmian Empire after they murdered his ambassadors, leveling entire cities and building pyramids of skulls as warnings. His armies moved faster than any in history, up to 100 miles a day, using Pony Express systems and signal flags. He incorporated Chinese siege engineers, Persian administrators, and European crusaders into his armies. He was tolerant of religions but utterly merciless to those who resisted. When he died in 1227, his body was carried back to Mongolia by an escort that killed every human being they encountered on the way, so no one would ever know where he was buried. His tomb remains undiscovered to this day. Genghis Khan killed so many people that historians estimate it lowered the world's carbon levels because entire regions went fallow. 1 in 200 men alive today are his direct descendants. He didn't just conquer the world. He changed the genetic makeup of humanity. So there you have it, the 10 most feared warriors of the medieval era, from Harald Hardrada to Genghis Khan himself. These weren't just men, they were forces of nature. They were the reason kingdoms fell and empires rose. They were the reason parents told their children to behave, or the scary man with the sword would come for them. If you made it to the end, drop a comment and tell me which warrior terrified you the most. And if you want more videos like this, more blood, more steel, more absolute madness, hit that subscribe button, because we're just getting started. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next battlefield.